This week on Quadriga, debt drama. EU good? Greeks bad? European leaders say they want to save Greece. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras says he's being blackmailed by Europe. He says EU-imposed austerity is destroying the Greek economy and threatens the country's democracy. Tsipras wants the Greek people to decide in a referendum. So will they choose EU austerity or Tsipras? Coming to you from Berlin, Quadriga, the international debate. Your host this week, Melinda Crane.
Hello and welcome to Quadriga. EU-Greek debt drama. Who's good, who's bad? That's what we want to talk about today on Quadriga with three guests who are following events in Greece and in Brussels very closely. It's a pleasure to welcome Faye Karaviti. She is Berlin correspondent for the Athens news agency, the Real News Media Group, and Greece's Alpha TV. She says so many mistakes from all sides and all in the name of Europe, democracy, and solidarity. And it's a pleasure to welcome Ursula Weidenfeld. She's one of Germany's best-known economics journalists, has served in senior editorial positions for many of its leading business publications. She says Europe was built on compromise. Greece has put an end to that era. And finally, it's nice to have Alan Posner back with us again. He's a German-British author and commentator for the daily newspaper Die Welt. He says Greece shows that the idea of ever closer union is dead and Germany is to blame. Now is the time to rethink Europe. Faye Karaviti, our opening report opened with the question, will the Greek people choose austerity or Tsipras? What do you think? What's going to happen on Sunday?
I'm not sure if that's the question we're supposed to answer on Sunday. It's austerity or Tsipras. I think the Greek public opinion is torn at the moment. Nobody can actually predict anything. I wouldn't risk any prediction at this moment, but there's definitely a very strong debate going on in Greece at the moment. My only fear would be that the Greek people would end up divided over this debate.
And when you talk to friends, family, and compatriots, who is the good guy and who's the bad guy?
Well, it depends on whom you're talking to. Every time it's... The bad guy is usually Wolfgang Schäuble. Number two...
German finance minister.
Exactly. Number two would be Angela Merkel, most of the time. But at the same time, the Greek people have come to realize that it's actually also a responsibility that we have to take upon ourselves as well. So many years of bad administration, bad governing, and also it has to do with the people as well. We, the people, have a huge responsibility about what's going on today. And we elect governments and we have demands. We trust their promises, or this is all a big bundle. We have to, at some point, start to figuring out what's best for us, what we need as a people, and where our place is. Is it in Europe? Is it towards the West? Is it somewhere in between the East and the West? We have to decide this for ourselves. Maybe this is now the time to decide it.
Alan Posner, judging from the statement that you gave us, you would agree that the bad guys are sitting right here in Berlin. You said Germany very much to blame.
Yes, because basically we've imposed, for 5 years, we've imposed austerity on an economy which was already a basket case, which was why they couldn't pay their debts. Now, if everyone knows, since the Great Depression, if you impose austerity into a recession, you're only going to make things worse. This is, you know, when Germany tried that in 1932, the result was they elected a small little man with a moustache, right? And to force this kind of austerity onto a small country, that's the only reason they were able to do it, they should have known that the result was going to be economic chaos and political instability. And they did that. They went into this, you know, with eyes wide open, and at the same time sleepwalking into disaster. I'm not saying, you know, I know the Greeks, that's not my point. I know the Greeks have to do their homework. But this was exacerbated and made worse by Europe.
Ursula Weidenfeld, your own statement said that Europe was built on compromise. Chancellor Merkel made a very strong appeal for compromise at the beginning of this week, speaking to her own party on the occasion of its 70th birthday. But the fact is that she and the other members of the creditor group simply presented Greece with an ultimatum at the end of last week. That doesn't look a lot like compromise.
I think the question is who did this ultimatum? Was that the EU or was it Greece blackmailing the EU? And I think that the common feeling of ministers of the European Commission, of all of them at the end was that Greece is blackmailing them. And they were not ready to accept that, and that led to the referendum in the end.
In another debate that was held this week, the German finance minister, who you mentioned just a moment ago, Faye Karaviti, Wolfgang Schäuble, expressed his own disappointment, saying that the last vestige of trust had been destroyed. The feeling among many people here in Berlin is that the Greeks simply walked away from the negotiating table exactly at the moment when it might have finally been possible to reach a deal. That also doesn't look a lot like compromise.
No, we don't know the truth about that. I'm not sure about what really happened. The Greek government reported otherwise. They say that they were presented, like you said, like they were presented with an ultimatum. They just couldn't take it, and they had to go back and address the people. The truth, for me, I am astonished by the lack of leadership in Europe. Not only today, but since the beginning of this crisis. The lack of leadership, the lack of common sense, the lack of hands-on handling of problems. Greece, like you said, is a very small country. Nobody knew what was really going on in Greece until 2009. Is that true? Is that what we're supposed to believe now? There were structural issues in Greece for decades, and we were covering it up with money, cheap loans. This was bound to explode at some point. So the Greeks didn't know it. We have to do our homework. We are also responsible, but Europe is also responsible for this. And what they did in the beginning of the crisis, put more austerity measures and cut salaries and so on. But the real problem is in institutions. We lack institutions like health system, education system. You can't cut my salary and at the same time destroy the social safety net. When I have money, I can pay and go to a doctor or send my kids to a private school. But when I don't have money, this is the time when I need the social safety net.
Alan Posner, let's say that the EU did make some very big mistakes imposing such severe austerity, which you also said in your opening remarks. Does that give Greece the right to demand rescue, to demand bailout on its own terms? Because that seems to be the way that the Greek government sees it.
Well, no. I mean, I've very little sympathy for a radical left-wing government, which is paired with a fairly radical right-wing party in parliament. I mean, and they've behaved like school children. But you have to realise they're totally inexperienced in government. You have to cut them some leeway. No, they don't have a right to demand anything as creditors. We all know when we go to our bank and we owe the bank money that the bank, starts imposing stuff on us. But at the same time, if you keep on lending someone money whom you know isn't going to be able to pay it back, if you keep on imposing conditions that you know aren't going to produce any kind of growth, any kind of result that's positive, then you also, as the European Union, as Germany, the main creditor, have to take a hit. And this is something which Mr. Schäuble just doesn't want to admit. Someone who lends money to someone who isn't creditworthy is responsible for what happens. And if that means losing money, that means losing money.
But don't you think that in the case of Greece, I mean, there were few countries in Europe which had to do the austerity measures and which had to go under the program. Most of them are off now, and they're fine off now. But why didn't Greece as well as the others did?
Well, look, I mean, you're talking, for instance, Ireland. Look, Ireland
Portugal,
got into...
even Spain is better off now.
Well, Spain, maybe I wouldn't...
They made a turnaround, and everything seems to be not at the end and not successful, but in the right direction.
Possibly. Well, I want to go for Ireland first, because that's the main example people are taking. And Ireland had a banking system which collapsed, and the government had to bail out the banks, which is why they got into trouble. But while they were bailing out the banks were still there, earning money, paying taxes and so on, so Ireland got out of that. I'm not quite sure what the situation is in Portugal, but personally, if I was an investor, I'd be very wary of going in there, simply saying, oh, everything's OK, we've got a turnaround in Portugal. I'm not sure, but if...
The investors are going to Portugal. They are investing in Portugal now.
Many people, of course, would say that the answer to that question is exactly what Faye Karaviti told us a moment ago, namely poor governance. And there are a lot of people all over Europe asking, do those people in Athens really know what they're doing? Skeptics say that Syriza's policies reflect inexperience and ineptitude as much as ideology. Let's take a look at those who are shaping Greece's approach.
Yanis Varoufakis rides his motorcycle to work. The Greek finance minister is known for disregarding the rules of etiquette. Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras and his associates are viewed by some politicians in Brussels as reckless rowdies. They've been called egotistical and unprofessional. Some say they're leading the Greek people down the road to ruin and endangering the entire EU. But is that fair? The Greek government does have its supporters. Economics Nobel laureate Paul Krugman, for example, accuses Greece's creditors of, quote, an act of monstrous folly. He has long called for an end to austerity policy, which he says is destroying growth in Greece. The Greek rebels have certainly stirred up Europe's political mainstream. Are they at least bringing some fresh wind to Brussels?
Faye Karaviti, Paul Krugman's not a bad ally to have. Clearly, he thinks that the Greek government's on the right track here.
Same way as Joseph Stiglitz thinks these days. Yes, we've got some strong supporters. I'm not sure whether they support this particular government or they're... to me, it seems more like they're criticizing Europe more, and that they use the Greek example and the Greek government who's actually now speaking really this is the only voice to be heard at the moment, the strongest voice to be heard at the moment. So they rally behind it, I think. But Europe cannot afford to wait too much longer. Europe has to decide whether it needs more integration, whether it needs to stand still and take a breath and, you know, decide what to do next, or take the reforms deeper. I don't see us growing in any case.
Would you say Syriza has achieved or changed anything? I was quite interested to hear Finance Minister Varoufakis saying this week, look, we can't put a tax on the rich because our tax revenue authorities aren't in a position to collect it very efficiently. Isn't that exactly what he was elected to change?
Exactly, and it's been 6 months, almost 6 months. I mean, nobody in Europe would object to the Greek government trying to build new tax administration systems. Nobody would object to that. You don't need a memorandum to do that. You don't need an agreement to do that. And you don't need an agreement to tax the rich in Greece. But the rich in Greece and almost everywhere in the Western world, they have their ways of getting out of. And if the Germans...
Not only the rich, nobody is paying taxes in Greece.
Well, that's not true, because
you are
paying. Yes, I am paying taxes, and this is one thing that the German people don't actually know. When they say that they just give their money to a bottomless barrel, the Fass ohne Boden, they call it, that's not true. Their money has been well placed to save banks. It's our money.
Taxes are going down and down and down. And even every month, Syriza is in a position to change it, to collect it.
To collect it, but we have to pay high taxes, but people can't pay them anymore. This is the problem. It doesn't make any difference if you increase the taxes or not. You can't collect them. So the tax income becomes even lower.
Alan Posner, is this referendum really about a political question, or is it simply about power, about Syriza's determination to stay in power, come what may?
Well, yes, I think it is, because, look, Alexis Tsipras, in Brussels, he negotiated away almost everything he had been elected to do. The last thing they were talking about was reducing pensions further after having slashed them by 45% already, and increasing VAT. This was what he'd promised his electorate not to do. So he was in trouble with his own party. He was probably in trouble with his own electorate. So put it to the people. It's, you know, it seems to me the only thing he could do, unless he wants to increase the sort of despair amongst Greek people that they say we elect politicians and then they do what they want. He's just a member of the same old guard. So, you know, it is about power, but that's what politics is about. It's about getting a mandate for negotiating with Europe.
Is there really any sense at all to the referendum, Ursula Weidenfeld? The fact is that the bailout package, about which the voters are supposed to decide, has been a dead letter since Tuesday. It expired. So isn't the question that they're supposed to answer a moot question?
Well, I think they don't know what to decide, what they have to decide in the end, because there had been not only the offer of the EU, but also the two offers of the Greek government. So they don't know what to decide on the one hand. On the other hand, it should be something like lead to direction the government should go to. So if they get a yes to the offer, which doesn't exist any longer, they would have to step back. And if they...
The government would have to step down.
Yes, yeah. Because they wouldn't be able to deliver the decisions they had to find then. And on the other hand, if they get their no, Greek will just exit the euro and probably Europe.
I don't think so. If they get their no, Angela Merkel said it in the Bundestag, they'll have to renegotiate, and they will, because anything else.
But you have to get the not only a yes or no of the Greek people. You have to get it in Germany, in the Netherlands, in Finland, in the Baltic states, in Slovenia, Slovakia, and they won't get it.
Support for another bailout. But let's just stay briefly with the question of that yes vote and whether, in fact, this government would then be likely to call new elections. What do you think, Faye Karaviti? Are other guests right?
It could be the case. Mr. Varoufakis just today said that he could not see himself signing an agreement without a debt write-off. So if there's a yes, he hinted he would probably resign. A lot of people would ask the government to resign, will push the government to resign if there's a loud yes on Sunday. On the other hand, if there's a no, this would probably make the Greek government I'm not sure it would make them stronger as they think, because the message all over Europe would be, we don't like you. We don't like Europe.
And we don't trust you.
Same.
And do you think that a no does lead in the direction of what's been called Grexit? That's what Paul Krugman was saying in that quote that we just saw. He has said, in fact, that the Greek people should vote no as a step on the road to leaving the EU. Is that really a feasible alternative that a lot of Greeks would want to see?
I don't think so. The vast majority of Greeks still want to stay in the Eurozone. They are not willing to take anything just to stay within the Eurozone, but this is their way of life now. It's the uncharted waters are not very attractive at the moment for Greeks. They are already suffering, and this trip to the unknown is not really attractive. But I'm not sure, I have to agree with you on that. I'm not sure that a no would lead to that. It would lead to more difficult negotiations, that's for sure. It would create a worse climate and the atmosphere would deteriorate. But I'm not sure it would lead directly to a Grexit.
Not directly, but I think in the end there will be no alternative, because
no alternative
to an exit, because nobody, if they get their no to the offer, which doesn't exist any longer. If they get the no, nobody trusts the Greek government in Europe any longer because of the last 2 weeks. Even Martin Schulz, who is one of the biggest friends of the Greek government, said he had never had imagined to be confronted with the situation and with
also
the government.
Jean-Claude Juncker, the head of the EU Commission, very, very emotional.
These people are non-elected bureaucrats.
Do you think that Wolfgang Schäuble or Angela Merkel think in another way? They don't do it. They don't have a different approach to the Greek government.
But the fact is, Ursula Weidenfeld, there is no orderly process for any state to leave the Eurozone. It's not written into the
There is no orderly
document.
process for Greek to stay in the Eurozone. So if you don't have any orderly process for anything, you can decide quite freely.
De facto, Faye, Karaviti, if we look at the situation on the ground, it's already looking pretty tight. The Greek banks are running out of money. It's quite possible that the Greek government may soon have to begin paying pensions and other things, perhaps your salary, I guess you work for a public broadcaster, with IOUs. What is that scenario de facto? Does that amount to, if not an exit, at least a parallel currency?
Worst case scenario would be a bail-in in the banks if the banks have to cut our savings. This would be a disaster case in Greece because people still have money in the banks, although they took a lot of it out in the recent years. But this would actually force developments, I think. Developments are going very fast as we speak. And the situation on the ground, like you said, is really bad at the moment.
But force them in what direction?
Any. Nobody can tell at the moment. The atmosphere is so tense in Greece, and people are confused. And they're presented with this. It's an ultimatum. I mean, the referendum is an ultimatum itself. They don't know what it means. They hear people saying that this is a yes or no to the Eurozone. So you have to really take it seriously. So the government says, no, it's just an agreement and a direction. And if you say no, you just give us more strength to represent you and gain more on your behalf. But people don't really know what's at stake here. Nobody can actually tell them. And if you mentioned Martin Schulz and Jean-Claude Juncker, to my knowledge, I mean, I think that it would be better if these people didn't speak anymore. I mean, for what time is left until the referendum?
Not on any subject, I agree there.
So what I'm hearing from you is that whether we get a yes-no vote or a no vote, we're likely to see more troubling images like these.
Are these the kinds of images we need to get used to? They could be, if Greece doesn't let itself be rescued by the EU.
Alan, can we afford to let Greece spiral downward, also afford to do so geopolitically, afford to do so in the sense that Greece already has a far-right party, which could grow stronger? Can we afford all that politically?
No, we can't, which is why it's not going to happen. And we shouldn't even be thinking about it, and we shouldn't be talking about a Grexit for that very reason. Also, plus, I mean, we have poor people all over Europe, and that's, you know, part of the problem. We don't have enough growth, even in countries which are supposed to have come out of the crisis so incredibly well, like Portugal and Spain and so on. There's minimal growth from a very low standard. So that's our big problem in Europe, and that's why we have poor people all over the place. And kicking Greece out would exacerbate that. It would be politically incredibly stupid. Plus, it would be the end of the idea of the European Union that we're all progressing towards this ever closer union. Because if we can sort of kick someone out of this process, then we're obviously not progressing towards, we're progressing towards disintegration.
Ursula Weidenfeld, let's say that Greece did reapply for support on the basis of misery like what we just saw there. Would it actually get it from the German parliament at this point? If you listened to the debate yesterday, it sounded like in Chancellor Merkel's own party, there are a lot of people who are saying enough is enough.
I think there are many people in Europe thinking it is enough, but they will get help. It's incredible to think that they won't get help if they ask for help. But they have to do their reforms. They have to build up their institutions. They have to check their people. And if they are not ready to do that, we will probably buy another 6 months. But then we have the Brexit afterwards.
Thank you very much to all of you for being with us today. And thank you out there for tuning in. See you soon.